The jurisdictions have to be careful to maintain that supply of buildable lots, because at some point, with the demand that's going to come from new construction, because we don't have enough existing houses for sale, there's a possibility that new construction will jump up a lot as these buildable lots become scarcer and also harder and harder to create new ones. So I think that's something that the jurisdictions and the market has to watch out for.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, today. This is Matt Fowler. I am the Executive Director of Triangle MLS, and I'm going to let everybody go down the line here and introduce themselves. This is our first quarterly statistics call with the University of North Carolina Kenan-Flagler School and the Wood Center to look back at the last quarter. And since it's the close of Q3, we're going to also look at year to date. And we've got some representatives from both organizations on the phone today. So I'll just go down and ask you guys to introduce yourself in the order you show up on my screen, which starts with Roberto. Put you on the spot there, Roberto.
Yeah, thanks. Roberto Quercia, Professor, City and Regional Planning.
Thanks, Roberto. I've got Randy next.
Randy Cox, Vice President, Managing Broker with Coldwell Banker, Howard Perry and Walston, and also sit on the TMLS board as a director.
Randy, would you say you specialize in a certain part of the territory?
Certainly, I mean, the aspects of what the general brokerage side, resale, and then also new home construction, licensed general contractor, been in the business for 30 years. So obviously, we've seen an awful lot over those 30 years.
Sure, thanks. Nathan, and then Jeremy.
Hey, I'm Nathan Godin. I'm a PhD student in finance and real estate at UC Berkeley.
Well, Nathan's our intern. He's been making us look really good. Jeremy.
Yep, Jeremy Moulton. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Public Policy.
Fantastic. Jim.
I'm Jim Spaeth. I'm a professor of the practice in commercial real estate finance at UNC Kenan-Flagler.
Awesome. And Eric.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Eric Murray Bojuk. I'm a professor of the practice at the UNC Kenan-Flagler School of Business.
Fantastic. And I didn't intentionally make you last, Jacob.
I think I made myself last. Jacob Segee here. I'm a professor of finance and real estate at the Kenan-Flagler Business School, UNC Chapel Hill.
Fantastic. And these guys are on the line with us at Triangle today because of a partnership that we have formed. This is a press release that was released on September 21st about that partnership. And this is all about trying to just learn from the data that we have and that together with the data that the university has to try and help practitioners in the marketplace make better decisions, but also policymakers, developers, people in leadership that need to understand what's actually happening on the ground here in the Triangle. I put together this outline to just kind of organize the conversation. I expect it with a room full of people like this, with all this experience, to go off in another direction if you guys want to, talk about any of these things in depth. But I'll kick us off by looking at a chart of the most recent pricing. Of course, pricing is a reflection of where we are in the marketplace, a direct reflection. And this is looking at average price, I believe, median, over the last 3 years. And this is our charting system inside the MLS. We have reports that we've shared with our members and with the professors about just the trends of pricing. And I've stretched this out to look at the last 10 years to show where we are and sort of the influence of COVID. And I just want to maybe get I expect to just make this open if you guys can unmute yourself. It's a small enough group. Let's just maybe start with Randy. And Randy, do you feel that the media that we've seen about a serious correction in pricing is something that we would expect to see in the Triangle?
No, actually, I don't, and in part because it is I think we're unique in that there's some elements of the triangle, whether it be the education system, the hospital system, the fact that we're probably one of the most desirable areas to live in the country with a large population moving in. I see that as a positive, and then I see the fact that we have limited inventory. Actually, our prices are stable and they're coming down very little. And depending on where you are in the triangle, you know, obviously we talk about there's the market, the larger market, and then there's markets within markets. You know, we're seeing multiple offers at certain price points. Yes, we're seeing in some places a slight correction, but it's ever so slight. Days on market, obviously a little bit longer, but that's more of a normalization than it is a correction, like some of the media outlets are suggesting.
Yeah, I think the data really supports that stability statement. Anybody else have any thoughts about pricing? I added the Chatham County chart here, which shows that the median sale price in Chatham County, just to pick on that area, I knew it was a tight market, is all the way up to 650, and you see it's ticked up, not down, in the last couple of periods.
Yeah, I am Roberto here. I think Randy is correct. I think the fundamentals around here are quite strong and likely to sustain the market. I think the biggest headwind, of course, is the rising interest rates. But again, so far we have weathered it nicely. So even if we see another quarter point increase in November or December, I think the market will be resilient.
You think another quarter point, you think increase by the Fed? Is that what you were projecting?
Yeah, I don't know if you all heard Chairman Powell speak today. He spoke this morning that more action will be needed, given that the most recent data suggests that there is still a lot to do for the Fed to bring it down to the target rate of 2% inflation.
Sure.
So the expectation is that I think at least one rate, maybe not November, but maybe December, but there will be another at least quarter point increase.
Yep. Yeah, I had not heard that. Further tightening by the Fed is not going to help the 10-year government bonds. These are trading in inverted territory, which is really interesting. I'd love to hear somebody's thoughts about that. But I think looking at pricing as we're going to have a significant, further increase to choke off this demand as we show pricing to rise. I think we can, however, look at the where's the total sales, closed sales. Here we go. We kill Chatham County so we can focus on the overall territory. You can see that looking back over a 10-year period, this is a fairly low number. At 2,800 sales in September. For historical Septembers, that's a good bit lower, 20% less than last year. So the volume of transactions that are going through the marketplace, people are still buying and selling houses, obviously at a pretty good rate, almost 3,000 last month, but it's historically constricted.
Matt, this is part of this. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's a story that you sometimes hear, is that because rates are relatively high compared to what these people had locked in 2020 or something, 2021, they're not wanting to sell unless they have to. And so you do see a little bit of that. You said a 20% reduction in sales, so there's a little bit less, but house prices definitely staying up. So
yes, I think that's certainly partially a function of the constricted supply. And if you look at this new listing so far in 2023, this is all post interest rate spike. And this doesn't look like a historical year. You know, when you look back at the past, there hasn't been a spring, summer at this level. You know, you have to go back farther than 10 years to see the contraction in new listings coming on the market over a summer period.
What does that look like? I was wondering what the original list price looks like over that same time period.
The discount, yeah, from original.
It's minimal based on the information that we try and track on a weekly basis, monthly basis, as an office and as a firm. We actually do track that, and we see in some of our transactions that, it's actually above list. And then in others, maybe it's a 98, 97% of list, but it's not where it's significant 10%, 15%.
I think the challenge is to tease out the impact of higher rates vis-a-vis the impact of limited supply. So it may be that you have a low number of sales because there is no supply. That is, to me, most likely, given the area in which we live, than it is the interest rate. I think interest rates obviously have an impact, but if you look at the other statistics you shared with us, days in the market and all this stuff, there is change, but not that significant to suggest kind of an abnormal year. So I think that limited supply is what is wreaking havoc in your numbers here.
But the interest rates, Roberto, are actually limiting the supply, right? I mean, they're definitely reducing the amount that a buyer can pay for a property, but at the same time, they're causing homeowners not to sell their current home because their interest rate is sub 3, and they're going to be looking today at almost an 8.
Yeah, indirectly, yes. I was thinking of the home buyers, but you're looking at the sellers. Yeah, that's where the supply is limited and hindered by the higher rates. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where that new home, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but that's where some of the new home volume is probably playing a role, and new home builders at certain price points in certain communities trying to help with interest rates. And I look at the interest rate and buy downs and those types of programs as really buying time for the consumer until interest rates do adjust, and they will. My fear is that when interest rates do come down, though, the impact that it's going to have on pricing is not going to be favorable for the consumer, because now you're going to have all of these buyers that are potentially sitting on the sideline come back into the market, and we haven't brought additional inventory to help with the supply and demand issue.
Yeah, inventory is still really low. If you just look historically at the 10-year chart of homes for sale, we can actually break this down a little bit by price range. It's interesting. This is overall, and you see, last summer was just almost off the chart, and has come back and is still trending up a little bit. But if you look historically at this number, 10,000, 8,000 for almost a decade was normal. And now, we're struggling to get back up to 6,000, as Randy indicated.
Yeah.
That's just a continued tightening, which I think is not something that indicates that there's significant downward pressure on pricing, for sure.
Matt, can you tease that out between, I see as a new construction, you have resale?
Yep. So that's new construction over the 10-year period. And we get a pretty good scope of new construction. We don't get it all. Not every not all builders run their sales through a realtor or through the multiple listing service. So we get a pretty good number, but not all of it. And then, so that's showing 10% decline in the number of homes for sale, new homes for sale this September versus last September, the most recent month that we have data. And switching it over to resale, you'd see a 17% decline over last year.
And I think some of that is driven by, and I'm a licensed general contractor and actually have an ownership interest in a small building company. I think some of that is driven by speculation as to where things are headed. And so, whether there's starts that maybe would have happened that aren't happening now because of where things are, where interest rates are, the cost of money obviously impacts builders that are borrowing Not everyone is they've got a reserve of cash. That's also over the long haul that has a negative effect on supply, which is going to add to what is the already existing problem of lack of supply, where we won't have as much as we should have if there was a little bit more stability in the marketplace or less questions.
Well, the other thing I'd add to that chart that may affect the supply of new houses going forward, I attended a conference in another part of the state where they cited the amount of buildable lots as a problem going forward, not just the cost of their capital to build new houses. So this was it's probably the same kind of dimensions for the triangle, but this was for data in the Winston-Salem, Greensboro area, where, for example, year to date they've had about close to 8,000 finished lots as a supply for new houses. Whereas, 9-10 years ago, that was more like 14,000 lots. And so I think we have to be careful, or the jurisdictions have to be careful to maintain that supply of buildable lots, because at some point with the demand that's going to come from new construction, because we don't have enough existing houses for sale, there's a possibility that new construction will jump up a lot as these buildable lots become scarcer and scarcer, and also harder and harder to create new ones. So I think that's something that, the jurisdictions and the market has to watch out for.
Matt, I was also interested. I noticed on the InfoSparks pane, you could adjust that for the price ranges. I'm wondering on that new construction, is a lot of that primarily in the top end? And I could be biased because I'm down in Chatham County, where a lot of that is mostly on the top end, at least from what I see. I haven't looked directly at this data, but I'm almost wondering if you could bump that to 600 or 700 or more, if that would change.
In your market, 680 is median.
Yeah, that's right. It's gonna be all
have to. Yeah, exactly. So, so I don't have the ability in this particular tool to break it down in the price ranges. These are pre-selected. But I think where you're going there, Jeremy, with the idea that the inventory issue, really you can't talk about it in a holistic way, because 244 and less, it's just non-existent.
Yeah.
Right. So the 470 and up market moves in a completely different, just universe than the bottom quintile here, or quartile. So I think this is
square footage pricing, can you, on this one? I'm just wondering if there's any way, not like a full hedonic model or something crazy, but I'm just thinking, is there a way to sort of get an idea of is this a compositional change in the type of houses that are selling that's causing the price to stay high, or is it actually that the price of quality fixed home is staying high, if that makes sense? Is the sample changing of the types of homes that are selling in this market changing, or is it that the prices have just stayed high? Because if it's only expensive new houses selling, then the price is going to stay high. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that is fair, and I think you are like reading between the lines there to see what's happening. If you look at new construction, it is primarily on the upper end. It's also a function of cash sales. So a lot of these new home purchases are cash. These are people that have exited a resale in this extraordinary housing market we've just come out of, and they've rolled that cash over into a new house. And as that chart indicated before, the percentage of new homes that make up the total market is continuing to rise over time. And I think you saw it really spike over COVID to more than 50% of the total houses sold in the marketplace were new. People that are selling their family home and buying a new home, anecdotally want a new house, and we're seeing that in the stats. Those also aren't houses that are constrained by people who have to move out of them.
To Eric's point on the lots, I think another. What's that? Andy. No, I think to Eric's point on the available lots, I think one of the factors that is sometimes not talked about, and really sort of behind the curtain, is the staffing at the individual municipalities. We've had turnover, whether it's within Chatham County, Orange County, and that slows down really the approval process on permits for developers and for builders, which then causes somewhat of a little bit of a backlog and the system not moving quite the way it needed to or needs to moving forward. And I think that plays into available lots. It's just taking longer for things to move through the system for approval. And I think that there's some federal state regulations that have now been pushed down for approval at the county level that are also slowing down the system, because it was used to running one way pre-COVID. And now there's been somewhat of an overhaul, a slight overhaul of how it needs to move moving forward. And that too is causing for there to be less lots, thus less properties for sale.
Another element, and again, is not constraining at the moment. Chapel Hill is having a municipal elections, and there are a number of candidates that are for slow development. And I think the slow development candidates, including the mayor, if they were to win, is likely to probably be even more challenging instead of lots for development and in overall the approval development process in the town. So when we meet again in April or next quarter, the numbers may or the forecast may look somewhat different.
Agreed, Roberto.
I think when we met before, Eric and Roberto brought up a couple of metrics that Triangle historically hasn't tracked, but we plan to bring those things into this new partnership. Things like building permits issued, subdivision lots approved, inbound migration, where we see the number of jobs that have been announced for industrial relocation projects. And those are things that we need to that certainly affect demand and supply, and we need to track those things just as much as we track the sales information that we have access to. Currently, the data that we're really the only other data that we're really pulling in that isn't just direct sales data from the property transactions is this demand data that indicates the number of times that a house is shown by to a buyer by one of our subscribers. And you can see that this is sort of returned to something that feels like kind of normal after the craziness of last year. February peaked right before interest rates. I think that was in March. And then we saw a significant fall off in just the number of sales activity. That's still something like 50,000 appointments scheduled per month to go see listings in our network. So still a huge amount of activity.
I think it's also interesting to think about the spatial element of this, right? If 50, 60% of your homes for sale are new homes, generally those aren't located in the city centers or even the near core. Those are generally suburban or exurban locations, out in the kind of fringes of the triangle. So folks that are looking, coming into the area and looking are probably, in some ways going to be living farther and farther away from their job centers, assuming the job centers are more in those core or continue to be more in those core or near core locations. So it has some long, at least in the, perhaps medium and longer term repercussions for especially for some of these outlying jurisdictions, right? That'll see the majority of the growth, and there'll be new residents coming in. All they only have those options available to them for the most part.
Yeah, my friends in the mortgage industry, Jim, say that buyers have to drive till they qualify. And if your job's in Wake County and you make $60,000 a year, it's a struggle to find a place to live. You have to drive to maybe Smithfield or or Person County to find a property that's at a price point that you can afford at that income level. And we study that. If I can bounce over there real quick, in a chart that we refer to as the Housing Affordability Index. And I'm bringing that up because one of the kind of goals that we have for this partnership of ours is that we will somebody's going to hear this podcast that's maybe on the planning commission in Clayton or one of those outlying areas, and they're wishing they had better information about the economics of their area in terms of housing, so that they can make data-driven decisions, so that when those subdivision lots that we so badly need are approved, that they're done so in a way that is in keeping with responsible land use policies. Triangle is involved with a couple of organizations. The Urban Land Institute is the leading one, who is I think authoritative voice in smart city planning. And if our organization and your organization could come together and support those initiatives, I think we will have done a really good thing, not just because we get to live there, but for future generations as well. Just the Housing Affordability Index, not to bang on a bad set of data. I mean, I think the reason that I continually talk about it, because it isn't great news, is that I want those policymakers to understand the severity of the problem. And in the triangle at large, we're at 71. So that median income is 71% of the income necessary to qualify for a median priced house at current mortgage rates. And we can drill in on that, and I will. Places that are, this is the entire 16 county area. I'll get somebody to comment on what they think about affordability. Of course, it's related to the income, cost of funds, and the price point. And those things have to kind of move in concert for that to get better for the average person.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out that's the average unaffordability. Once you segment that by income, the unaffordability for somebody earning below the median income is actually worse than the chart you just mentioned. So
That's right.
So the impact is actually disproportionate to people lower than the median income, and the kind of jobs that those have are those are the jobs that are most at risk of having a untenable living situation or having to commute much further away from our area just to service the needs of our population. So I think it's interesting once we segment that by income quintile. I think we'll see that the impact isn't the same for everybody. It's much worse for a lot of working families.
Yeah, Eric, if that was kind of a pain index, the percentage of income and going towards housing, clearly on the bottom end of the income level, it's just entirely untenable for people. They're couch surfing if they're not homeless, and underhoused if they're not for a large number of really working Americans. And looking at places like Chapel Hill and Farborough, I know I keep picking on them, we're down to 48 on housing affordability. Imagine that number for the bottom quintile. I mean, there are none of those people, income wise, living in that area.
And the next step to that is, if they're driven out of the ownership market, they go into the rental market. But once you connect the dots to the rental market, you'll see the same thing. The unaffordability transfers into the rental rates, and unlike the new housing market, the rental market has seen a collapse in new starts because of financing. So although we're going to get a lot of units delivered in 2024, these were started maybe 2 years ago, the number of units going forward for rental is going to be much, much less, because the number of new projects have basically been really affected by interest rates for the developers. So it kind of all connects the big housing market, I guess, between ownership and rental. But yeah, on the lower end of that scale, they're being hammered from both sides, unaffordable to own and increasingly unaffordable to rent.
Yeah, and if I may add to what Eric said, I think in addition to that, I think probably it's important to look at this in a more holistic way from a household budget perspective. Families are not only dealing with increased housing costs, but health insurance, gas to go to work, food. There is a lot of other things that poses demand on household budgets these days that are much greater than 2 years ago. And so I think the level of comfort that a family needs to have to buy a house is really much higher than probably these numbers may suggest, especially at the low end of the market.
Yeah, supply is just so constricted at the bottom end of the market, and all of these constraints on that. If we look at homes for sale at 245 and less across the market, I mean, I think that chart pretty much says it all.
Mhm.
There aren't any.
Yeah.
You guys are all bumming me out.
I know.
I was hoping somebody on this call had a solution.
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to look at this as glass half full. If you look at all these numbers in relative terms, relative to where the area used to be, then yeah, it looks distressing. Things becoming less affordable, etc. But if you look at it cross-sectionally, in other words, you compare to other areas around the country, this area has experienced a steady growth in jobs of 3% per year. Right? I mean, if this continues over the next 5 to 10 years, that's 30% more, wage earners in this area. So, but why are they coming? It's because on a relative basis, this is a really attractive place to live. So, we're a lot of the doom and gloom here is really a symptom of the success, the economic success of this area. I think we should not lose sight of that. So there are two ways to make this area affordable. One, you destroy the economy. That'll make things affordable in a hurry. Right? I don't think we want that. The other way to make things affordable is you build. And you figure out ways to make it more affordable to build, but it's a supply problem here. People want to be here in order to house them. We need to solve the supply issue.
That's a really important point, Jacob. And I think I'm pointing out the median days on market. I mean, this is a very direct reflection of the level of the intensity of demand. You put a house on the market on our network, and, from 2018 on, and you can expect us to move your property and get you your money in less than 10 days. That's crazy. That's an enormously powerful marketplace, and it's an indication of demand. That's just incredible.
And just to put that in perspective, Matt, if I wanted to move money from here to Canada, more than $10,000, it would probably take 10 days for the money to go from one bank to the other and go across international because of all of the checks and balances that go with that. Sure. So put things in perspective.
I think in addition to Jacob's wise comment about supply as the answer, there is something I think also about the streamlining and simplifying of the development approval process that I think would help, at least in our time, and I think more broadly in the triangle. I think the market is not what it was maybe when some of these processes were put in place. And so maybe rethinking about those approval process may speed up. But again, I'm not sure if it will solve the problem, but I think we certainly help in addition to additional supply.
I kind of echo what Jacob said. I mean, all of these are problems of success. There's a lot of places in the U.S. where housing is cheap, but nobody wants to be there because of a lack of opportunity. I actually, just to echo on the supply, I actually was curious. I mean, nationally, I think the Association of Realtors had a stat a couple of weeks ago that in September, we were building about 1.3 million, 1.35 million of all housing types. So I got curious. So 20 years ago, in 2000, we were building about 1.5 million. That was 20 years ago. And 20 years before that, we were building about the same, 1.5 million. And the population was about 100 million people less. So it really is a housing supply issue, coupled with the economic success of some really good areas of the country, like our area.
Jay, real quick to follow up on Roberto's comment about incentivizing supply through development approvals. I mean, you can do that in a stratified way, right? I mean, you can essentially try to move product at the lower end of the price ranges through your development approval process in an expedited manner, almost kind of a front of the line thing. And there are some jurisdictions, some states that have taken steps towards that. And I'm not aware of any triangle jurisdictions that have done that yet, but that would certainly be a lever that folks might want to try out at some point.
I think as we wrap up our first call here, I want to see if I can pose a couple of questions, and after a little bit of positivity, taking a page from Jacob there. I would like for us to think about that zoning committee member or that city planning employee in a neighboring community who really is trying to make a decision right now, and they get a lot of data from the developers, I know, and I would like to support them and be a place where they can reach out. We'll have information on how to contact us in the podcast that results from this, so that people can reach out and ask their questions about development. I think there are supply-based things, but there are also these frictional issues that we talked about that we can help with, and we're finding some technologies that might streamline the approval process and and just the education of people who need to know what's possible in their jurisdiction. But first, before that, if you were going to go out and talk to, if you're invited to speak to Clayton about how to prevent sprawl and do smart land use planning or zoning, would anybody want to raise their hand and say something that we can leave them with about how to do development in their communities smarter? Anybody want to hazard a throw at that?
Well, I mean, I would start with, and if they're starting from scratch, I think it starts with a partnership and a mindset that you're working together. I mean, I look at Chatham Park as an example, 22,000 home sites, 66,000 people over the next 20 years. And, obviously a joint venture with some very skilled developers and some money backers. But it took the energies of those folks really aligning with what is the goal of those community members that are Chatham, to try and maintain what makes Chatham special. And it became more of a let's work together to reach an end goal so that we can make all different types of housing available across all fronts. 800 square foot houses within the same community that has 3,500 square foot housing available, that has amenities, that has a sort of a lifestyle. But it doesn't come without working together and just being transparent and then opening the floor to the most creative and best ideas. So I would start there if I were going to reach out and be a guest speaker in a place that's trying to accomplish that.
Yeah, I think in the past when I've worked with local governments elsewhere, there was a saying that, if you don't plan for growth, growth will do the planning for you, because our communities are so attractive and the quality of life is so good, the new people are going to come. It's just a matter of how do we accommodate them. If we accommodate them in a way that we build the housing necessary for new workers and new residents, then the growth will be managed and not a burden for any part of the community. So I think that kind of mindset at the beginning and a little bit more welcoming and accommodating of growth and new residents and planning for housing for them, I think is a good mindset to start with. And so we kind of tamped on a little bit of the not in my backyard kind of thinking, where growth happens somewhere else, and we just keep our community sort of the same. But we are in a high growth area, so I think that kind of mindset, I think, is a good start. And then from there, hopefully, as Randy pointed out, we can, the industry and government can work together to make sure we have the supply of homes that we need, to maintain the quality of life for everybody.
I think that my first inclination is to caution. Is one of caution. I think we are still dealing with a pandemic, post-pandemic. You cannot close down the U.S. economy or the world economy for a year or two and not have really big structural changes. I think they are still happening. It's difficult to know where the shoe is going to fall. My advice to Clayton or other communities is to, as Randy mentioned, partner with people that are in the industry. I know, with Matt or Randy himself. It's really difficult to know where interest rates will be 2-3 years from now, what the economy will look like 2-3 years from now. I think the signs are good, but I think we got in a transitional stage that makes it really difficult to investors, and even if communities were to open their doors to development, for that to happen. I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there in the industry and in the market. Using data as the one provided by TMLS is great. And so I think with that foundation, I would try to gain as much wisdom from knowledgeable partners, like many people in this call, to move forward. But again, if somebody tells me what the market will do 2 years from now, or next year, economy can agree whether we have a recession or not next year. We're talking about 6 months from now. It's really difficult to know how to turn this around in a way, especially that helps the low income end of the market.
Yeah, it is such a challenge. My crystal ball is really faulty. I don't know how yours is working, Roberto, but mine is really cloudy.
Yeah, I'm plugged. Yes.
So I'm gonna I guess close out the call with a little preview. We were talking about of a couple of things. First, we're gonna have another one of these at the end of the year when Q4 is over. So that's actually going to be in mid-January, not mid-April. So we'll do that around the 15th or so of January, and we'll schedule that coming up. One of the things that we've been doing is trying to find startups in the housing space that can either help with the supply issue we were just talking about, or help first-time home buyers, or just some way to move things along. And we met these guys. And this is a startup from Raleigh that allows you to put in any property in Wake County, and it effectively is oh no, it's going to fail on me. We'll have to edit that out. Hopefully that'll work. Is that going to work? All right, bummer. That's what I get for live television. I'll tell you what it is, and then send you a link to it. So this is a new tool that is a city planner in a box. So they have ingested the UDO into a generative AI tool, and you can ask the little box here once it loads any question about the property that you would ask a city planner. And the example that we've used is, can I add an ADO to my property. And it gives you a comprehensive answer, citing all of the appropriate portions of the UDO. And at the end of it, allows you to send a completed application into the planning office that gives you the ability to complete that application. So things that might streamline the process of approving accessory dwelling units on existing lots to build supply where there's already housing and schools and utilities and bus routes makes a lot of sense to us. While we do want to, see new subdivision lots approved in the right place, we also want to encourage infill development in those communities that find that appropriate. So anything that might speed that up is really interesting. This little tool, when it works, is going to be part of our new consumer portal probably, and be available outside of Wake County for homeowners that might want to log into our systems, which are really there for them in the first place, to help educate them about what might be possible in terms of development on their own property. That's kind of cool. Wish it worked, but I'll send you guys a link, and once I tell Pat to go kick the server. Any closing thoughts on stats here at this time of the year, or anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
I mean, I would just want to say one thing, and I appreciate everyone being on the call too. I'm actually inspired, and yes, everything everyone said is factual. It's real. Affordability, people have to go further out, obviously, to go ahead and be able to get what they want. Those are the times we're living in, but I also feel, and I've got a good number of people, boots on the ground, there are a significant number of buyers out there. Interest rates are what they are right now. The American people are resilient. They're going to go ahead and figure out a way to go ahead and move on and get through high interest rates. They're somewhat impatient, I think, as we know, and so they're only going to tolerate high interest rates for so long before they actually move forward regardless. And so as we transition into 2024, we're in Q4 2023, it being an election year, all of those elements, I think that there's a bright future ahead, and the market will free up some, and movement will come back to the market. And hopefully we get a little help from the powers that be in the form of interest rates. But I'm looking forward to 2024.
Me too, Randy. Thanks very much. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody, for the time today. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks for doing this, Matt.
Thanks for having us.
See you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.